So the product manager should be tasked with the entire e-commerce experience because the product manager needs to understand that how does this product tie in to everything else, right? Particularly in e-commerce, you have things like logistics, operations, customer service. There's tons of issues like with even when it comes to returns or certain policies, different case scenarios, they all revolve around this e-commerce product, right? If that's the centerfold. And today specifically, right, with people going through digital transformation, e-commerce will be their storefront for most of the businesses. So today's topic, we're going to be discussing product ownership, all the general resources involved in the process of creating a product, the titles, the responsibilities, and then how do all these things kind of connect together. But the main key is about, having product ownership and, bringing product from start to finish. Hi, Lane. Welcome back. Always.
Hi, Yuri. Nice to talk to you again.
Last time we started talking a little bit about product ownership. And so I wanted to dive deep into what's involved, what type of resources it requires to innovate, conceptualize, develop, and launch a product. Product can be anything. It could be a website, an app, a physical product, even a marketing campaign, right? But at the end of the day, whatever that product is, you need ownership. There's been a lot of confusion between where a product manager fits in versus a project manager. And then there's always a UX designer stuck in the middle. And for many companies, UX designers kind of wind up taking on the role of both product and project managers. And I wanted to clarify that a little bit. Product manager is generally a resource that's responsible for the actual product, for the ideation and the communication with the stakeholders, to try to figure out the business side. How does the product fit in with the business and has an impact on the business? What are the limitations, budgetary limitations? What are the innovation opportunities, right? When a product person really is thinking about how this product will play out in the real world. And then once all those thoughts are put together, they are passed on to a project manager. And a project manager's responsibility is usually assigning proper resources, a schedule, and management of the budget to produce this product. In which case, generally, this is when a UX expert comes in to now create the experience for this product to work great for the consumers. But then usually most stakeholders just go straight to the UX person, and then the UX person is responsible to figure all this stuff out. So I wanted to get that, kind of clarity that most products require multitude of resources to be generated, and so that, people lay off the UX people a little bit.
Well, I think oftentimes you talked a little bit about the things that the product manager is responsible for gathering. And oftentimes in my experience, that's usually the requirements. They're kind of responsible for being the holding tank for the technical requirements and the business requirements and the user requirements. Right. But so often the UX designer has to be the loudest person in the room to get anybody to take the user requirements seriously. It's really difficult. User requirements are often so much more nebulous. They're oftentimes, framed around ideal visions, whereas business requirements and technical requirements are very concrete. They're very immovable because you're living those in the day-to-day business culture. And so if you're not sort of already a human-centered business, it can be really difficult for the user requirements to really get the appropriate weight at the table. With the product manager, in your experience with e-commerce, do you typically find that product managers own the whole e-commerce site? Or are there situations where certain people are tasked with certain types of experiences across the e-commerce?
So the product manager should be tasked with the entire e-commerce experience because the product manager needs to understand that how does this product tie in to everything else, right? Particularly in e-commerce, you have things like logistics, operations, customer service. there's tons of issues like with even when it comes to returns or certain policies, different case scenarios, they all revolve around this e-commerce product, right? If that's the centerfold. And today specifically, right, with people going through digital transformation, e-commerce will be their storefront for most of the businesses. And so a product manager needs to keep in mind what happens on the consumer side, what happens on the marketing side, what happens on the logistics and merchandising side, as far as cohesive experience, right? The ecosystem. But then the consumer experience needs to fall into the UX hands with the product manager's oversight, right? I think user experience needs to dictate that consumer interaction and should take a little bit more authority over the product managers, because UX is much closer to the consumer side than the product person.
I mean, you sort of ended on, I think, a really important note, which is like this whole element of like the putting the people at the heart of the business, like putting your consumer at the heart. So when you're making decisions, you're really thinking at the core, like, is this going to be, at least you're accurately weighing like the outcomes of those requirements. It might make sense to invest more in like a service or some kind of additional feature that's like brand specific, because you can see long term that like that's the expectation that the consumer is going to have when they're shopping for your particular product. But oftentimes that might, if you aren't doing user research and like really working to get that data into your company that's like both anecdotal, talking about the experiences that people have, how they're perceiving your touch points.
Right.
If you aren't doing the work to bring that information in, then so often the business requirements just usurp everything, because you don't have the right balance of understanding like where do we need to deliver a really unique and specialized experience versus like how are we maintaining brand value, making investments in infrastructure. And oftentimes those business requirements are so tech focused, like, when you're making major decisions about like payment processing on the back end, it can be really hard to see how those decisions are going to bubble up into the user experience. But if your product manager is really people driven, then like those conversations are happening really early in the decision-making process. And I think it's easier to see it play out in a healthy balance as the project comes to a conclusion.
Right.